once you have the threads on the guides, holding the guides in place, depending on the thread you use, you either want to use a color preserver, or if you used thread that already had color preserver in it, you wouldn't need to use this. A lot of people say if you use the color preserver on the thread for your guides, you don't get the epoxy penetration after the fact, because color preserver is really a glue. To me, it's like a white glue that's really watered down, and it seals in the color, and therefore the epoxy doesn't adhere to into the thread to the rod and gives you a good bond. I've not had any problems with doing this. The thread I'm using is Moderna size A, which maybe they don't have a size A, but that's about what it is. And I've been using the color preserver on it for a number of rods. They're my personal rods. I don't sell the rods, so but I've not had problems. A couple of the rods where I've done stupid things to them, where I've had to remove the guides, the epoxy does seem to go right down to the rod itself. So yeah, I am not an expert on this, but this is the way I do it. So the color preserver that I'm using is the ChromaSeal. I had originally used the Flex Coat. I don't see a difference in it. It's just my Flex Coat was getting old. I did notice, and you're not going to be able to tell in the video, but when it sits, it settles in the bottom. So you really need to get a stirring stick and stir it up. You could shake it, but you're going to get a lot of bubbles. So I'm going to stir this. I can feel it. It's grabbing all the way around. It's like a glue almost in the bottom. So this is how I'll prepare my color preserver before I'll put it on. I'll make sure it's mixed up real good. And then I put it on with a brush. Let it set for at least an hour. And then, you know, once it's dried, you can put on your epoxy. I'll probably let this sit up for about four hours at least. Maybe I'll wait till the next day before I'll put epoxy on it. So to put on the color preserver, I mean, your brush is dry at the beginning, so, you know, dip it in a number of times. And I'm going to put my and then I just spin the rod myself by hand. Now I'll put on about 3 coats of the color preserver before I'll put my epoxy on. So I go around the edge very carefully. And hopefully the video will show it, but you'll see it goes on as white, and then it dries clear. Well, it's not clear, but it does dry. So you don't see the white film. There's a lot of different ways people put color preserver on. This is the way I do it. And I just try and get an even flow. And you may wonder why I'm not going all the way to the ends. That's because I have an underlay under this guide wrap, and that's already got color preserver on it, and one coat of epoxy. So now that I've got this on, I will go around and just make sure it's even on all surfaces. And so that's actually in this case, this is my third coat of color preserver on that particular guide. There's no need to spin this after the fact because it doesn't flow like the epoxy does. It will just start setting up and the milky color will go away. So now I'll complete out the rest of the guides on this rod and let it set up, and I'll be ready for epoxy. This is how the ChromaSeal color preserver looks about 10-15 minutes after I applied it. You remember how creamy it was in the earlier video? Now it's completely cleared up, and you can't even tell that it was on.